Tonight, Rick Perry races to save his presidential campaign after falling out of the saddle in another debate.
Commerce, education, and the, what's the third one there?
The governor calls for calm after Penn State students riot in the protest of the firing of Coach Joe Paterno. After his wife suffered with cancer, Mark Davis devoted himself to a new and better treatment. John LaPook has his remarkable story. And just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water, no, not Jaws, whales.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. Presidential campaigns are often defined in a moment. For Rick Perry, that moment came last night and it lasted 53 seconds, an eternity for the Texas governor as he struggled through another debate and seemed lost in one of his practiced talking points. Today, Perry threw out his schedule and stepped in front of every TV camera he could find to try to erase the gaffe, but he was competing against a video of those awkward seconds that went viral on the internet today.
It's three agencies of government when I get there that are gone. Commerce, education, and the, what's the third one there? Let's see.
You need five.
Oh, five,
Yeah,
okay. So
five.
commerce, education, and the
EPA?
EPA, there you go. No, okay.
Let's talk deposition.
Seriously? Is EPA the one you were talking about? Or?
No, sir. No, sir. We were talking about the agencies of government. EPA needs to be rebuilt.
But
There's no doubt about that.
But you can't name the third one?
The third agency of government,
Yeah.
I would do away with the education, the commerce, and let's see. I can't. The third one I can't. Sorry. Oops.
Perry was supposed to go to Tennessee today, but he ditched that plan to come to New York so he could appear on 8 television programs. One of them, David Letterman, in the Top 10 segment. Perry will give his top 10 excuses for his debate debacle. CBS News political analyst John Dickerson is in Spartanburg, South Carolina, the site of the next GOP debate. John, this isn't the first time we've asked you this question after a debate. Can Rick Perry recover?
Well, what he was trying to do today is, in this full damage control mode, was show not only that there's some other person than that character in that clip, but also send a message to donors and supporters that he's in this race to fight for the nomination. After these lackluster debate performances, people worried that his heart wasn't really in it. The message today, with all this frantic activity, was his heart's in it, and he's in it till the end.
Saturday night, right there in Spartanburg, all the Republican candidates will be there to talk about foreign policy. How important is that debate to the Perry campaign?
The Perry campaign knows it's very important because it's one thing to have a momentary brain freeze in a debate. It's another thing to be unfit for that key job of being commander-in-chief. So Perry has been studying hard for this debate. He's been talking to former Ambassador John Bolton, getting advice on foreign policy. And what the campaign hopes is that he will be able to have a solid enough performance in this debate that they could say on the substance, he knows what he's talking about, even if he momentarily gets tongue-tied.
John, thank you very much. Perry lost his front-runner status after getting lost in a previous debate weeks ago. Dean Reynolds today is with the candidates who are benefiting the most.
A potential beneficiary of Rick Perry's political pratfall had a big smile on his face as he stumped through Michigan today.
Whoop, it's cool out here.
You did last night.
I think I did well.
And Mitt Romney seemed satisfied too. At the debate, he rebutted questions about his legendary inconsistency.
I think people understand that I'm a man of steadiness and constancy.
The front row cheering section.
But for Romney, the steadiness and constancy also applies to his support among fellow Republicans, which has never exceeded 25% in our CBS News polling. For Herman Cain, the troubles of a like-minded conservative like Perry could be a plus.
Good to see you.
Some in the crowd waited 2 hours to hear him in Ypsilanti. Stephanie Bazar was one.
He seems honest and true, even in light of what's been going on this last week.
The reference was to the accusations by at least 4 women who say Kane acted inappropriately with them. He's denied wrongdoing and blamed the Perry campaign, the news media, Democrats, or others for stirring up trouble.
Since they can't kill the ideas, they are trying to attack my integrity and my character. But the American people are not buying that. They are sick of gutter politics.
Later at Kalamazoo, he conceded it's been a trying time.
Over the last couple of weeks, I've been through hell. It didn't kill me or slow us down one bit.
And Scott, while Kane is not in the clear yet, his campaign claims to have raised more than $2 million in the last 10 days, just as this storm was breaking over him.
Thanks very much, Dean. As we mentioned, the next Republican debate is Saturday evening. You can see it here on CBS and on CBSNews.com at 8 Eastern Time. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett called the Penn State students who rioted last night knuckleheads. They took to the streets after trustees fired head football coach Joe Paterno and the university president. A former assistant coach is accused of molesting young boys there. Paterno told the university athletic director and a vice president about one alleged attack, but Paterno has been criticized for not telling the police. Armin Katayan is following the story in State College, Pennsylvania.
Joe Paterno is no longer the head football coach. Effective immediately.
Those 11 simple words from trustee John Surma set off a seismic reaction in State College, Pennsylvania last night. Within minutes, thousands of students took to the streets, outraged at the firing of their beloved head coach. They overturned a television truck, knocked down light poles, and battled with police for hours. Sources tell CBS News the Board of Trustees' decision to remove the winningest coach in the history of major college football was, in the end, a matter of weighing Paterno's 60-year legacy against deep damage to Penn State's image, its brand, and a football program that generates more than $70 million a year.
What we're doing is what we believe in our best judgment is in the best long-term interest of the university, which is much larger than athletic programs.
Throughout a packed press conference, Surma deflected the tough questions tied to the child sex abuse scandal.
Should Coach Paterno have alerted the police when he first learned of the sexual abuse allegations in 2002?
I don't know that I can characterize the board's view on specific determinations like that. Our view was a larger view of what was necessary to move the university in the right direction.
The 84-year-old Paterno responded to the firing just after getting word.
Get a good night's sleep, all right? Study, all right? We still got things to do. All right, I'm out of it maybe now. A phone call put me out of it.
He later issued a statement saying he was disappointed with the decision, but I have to accept it. Paterno's undoing came at the hands of a man he trusted for more than 30 years. Former assistant coach Jerry Sandusky.
One of the most respected.
Sandusky retired in 1999, but continued to have access to the football facilities. School officials were aware of alleged assaults inside the locker room shower in both 2000 and 2002. But Sandusky was reportedly seen working out in the facility as late as last week.
I take this job with very mixed emotions.
Today, interim head coach Tom Bradley held his first press conference. Not surprisingly, the legend he replaced was not far from his thoughts.
Coach Paterno has meant more to me than anybody except my father. And I don't want to get emotional and start talking about that, okay?
Penn State's decision to clean house is not just about protecting its image. From the people we've talked to, Scott, it's also about protecting itself legally against what is expected to be a flood of civil lawsuits by the alleged victims.
Armin, one of the sex abuse cases was reported by an assistant coach back in the early 2000s. What's become of him?
Well, that assistant coach, Michael McQuarrie, was a grad assistant at the time. He is now an assistant coach here at Penn State. The new coach, the interim coach, Tom Bradley, said today that McQuarrie will keep his job. He will be at the game on Saturday against Nebraska, but it will be a game-time decision as to whether he's on the field or he's up in the booth, Scott.
Armin, thanks very much. The Obama administration said today that it will hold off on making a final decision about a new oil pipeline between the U.S. and Canada. Environmentalists have been critical of the project, and today's announcement delays any action until after the presidential election. Mark Strassman has been in Calgary working on a story about the proposed pipeline. Mark?
Until this month, Scott, today's pipeline and the building of it seemed inevitable. Even Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said she was inclined to approve it. But today's delay, therefore, has stunned TransCanada, the company that would have built the pipeline, and its CEO is Russ Girling.
To come to the conclusion that we need more study is obviously very disappointing for us, and is going to be very, very disappointing for our customers.
The $7 billion underground pipeline would carry oil 1,700 miles from Western Canada through 6 U.S. states to refineries of heavy crude near Houston. Supporters say the pipeline from Canada's tar sand fields would create more than 20,000 jobs and reduce U.S. dependence on oil from the Middle East. But opponents argued the pipeline was a potential environmental hazard that could have polluted an aquifer that supplies drinking water for 8 states. TransCanada's CEO Russ Girling says his company will regroup with the U.S. State Department next week about the next step, and blamed environmentalists for hijacking the debate over the pipeline.
The tragedy is to the average American that manufactures things to supply the oil sands, whether it be tires, Caterpillar tractors in Pennsylvania. They're all over the United States. The average person that's out of work right now, this is a great opportunity to go back to work, and we're throwing it out the door if we let this project die.
Even if TransCanada gets eventual approval, the earliest construction could begin is sometime in 2013. This delay allows President Obama to put off a very tough decision. He was squeezed between environmentalists on one side and labor unions aching for jobs on the other. With this delay, Scott, he won't have to decide until well after next year's election.
Mark, thank you very much. How incinerated remains of America's fallen heroes wound up in a waste dump. An oil engineer comes up with a promising treatment for cancer. And whale watching. The whales are watching back when the CBS Evening News continues. An American soldier was convicted today of murder and conspiracy. It's a story that David Martin broke. Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs was charged with killing unarmed Afghan civilians. Gibbs admitted cutting off the fingers of the corpses to keep as war trophies. He faces life in prison. Just when we thought the scandal over mishandled remains of fallen American troops at Dover Air Force Base couldn't get any worse, it did today. David Martin has been reporting on the investigation that led to a career-ending letter of reprimand for the commander of the mortuary. And tonight, David is at the Pentagon with new developments.
A landfill is no one's idea of a fitting resting place for a soldier fallen in battle.
No service member, no human being at all should be placed into a landfill, no matter if it's a fingernail, a foot, or an entire body.
Yet that is what happened to Gary Lynn Smith's husband, Sergeant First Class Scott Smith, who was blown apart by a roadside bomb in Iraq in 2006. Without her knowing, part of his body was incinerated and disposed of as medical waste in this Virginia landfill. She found out 2 years after his funeral.
I have honestly no idea what we buried of him because they forbid me to see him in the casket.
Smith's parents signed this form authorizing the mortuary at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware to make appropriate disposition of any subsequent portions of his body identified through DNA testing.
They did not ever disclose to us that there was even a possibility that these remains would go into a landfill.
But she kept asking what had happened to the rest of her husband's body.
I finally got a gentleman on the phone who told me no one wanted your husband's remains, so they threw him in the trash with the rest of the medical waste from the hospital.
She didn't believe him, but it was confirmed in writing. Taken to a landfill in King George County, Virginia.
It completely shattered me. I have no faith whatsoever in Dover that our soldiers are being treated there with respect at all.
3 years ago, the Air Force realized in one general's words, "This is not right." Ever since then, remains that never reached their loved ones are buried at sea.
David, thank you very much. The engineer who developed a new way to fight cancer after watching his wife go through chemotherapy. His story is next. In the battle against cancer, there is a promising new treatment, a high-tech therapy that targets tumors and with fewer painful side effects than chemotherapy. How this treatment was developed is quite a story, told tonight by Dr. John LaPook.
And you can see the uniformity.
Mark Davis, a chemical engineer at the California Institute of Technology, was a complete stranger to the world of medicine. His expertise was in the oil industry. Then, in 1995, his wife Mary was diagnosed with breast cancer.
And there were many times during the therapies where I just really wanted to give up. I thought that the treatment was going to kill me rather than the disease itself.
The chemo killed the cancer, but wreaked havoc on her body, permanently damaging her hearing.
When she finished going through this, she just said, well, this is just awful. There really should be better ways to treat cancer patients where you can have high quality of life. She said, why don't you guys start working on it at Caltech? And I said, well, come on, I don't know anything about cancer. And her response to that was, well, what kind of excuse is that? So you can see all of the nanoparticles here.
So, at age 40, Davis changed his focus and with no medical training developed a novel way to treat cancer.
So cancer treatment is an engineering problem to some extent.
It is to me, and that's the way I looked at it from the very beginning.
He turned to nanotechnology.
They're fairly uniform in size.
Engineering tiny particles to do big things. In this video, they're seen penetrating the outer membranes of cells. Chemotherapy has toxic side effects because when the molecules are injected into veins, they are so small they can escape the bloodstream and damage normal cells along with cancerous ones. Davis built a new drug delivery system. He loaded hundreds of molecules of a cancer drug into microscopic spheres built from sugar. They are too big to slip out of the bloodstream until they reach their target. This allows them to destroy solid tumors, like lung and breast cancer, and spare healthy tissue.
Because we get much more drug in the tumor.
David Cherish of the University of California, San Diego, is also working on nanomedicine for cancer.
So in effect, we can reduce the level of drugs to the surrounding tissues, the normal tissues, increase the drug at the site of the tumor, and really get more bang for our buck.
Davis's nanoparticles have been tried in more than 50 patients in the U.S. and will be tested at more than 20 sites across Europe. So far, treatment using nanotechnology shows far fewer side effects than traditional chemotherapy. But using it to treat cancer is still in its infancy.
Almost, every month I get a phone call from someone who has a friend who's been diagnosed with cancer. And it's always in the back of my mind, oh, Mark, hurry up, hurry up.
This was a good start, but as engineers, we always want to do better. So we want to make version 2.0 and 3.0, and hopefully it'll just keep getting better and better.
Researchers are now filling these nanoparticles with all sorts of treatments, from chemotherapy to molecules that actually repair the broken genetic material that makes cancer cells grow out of control.
Fascinating, John. Thank you very much. There was a fascinating bit of American history put on display at the Smithsonian today. A book known as the Jefferson Bible. It's essentially a scrapbook of gospel excerpts in English, French, Greek, and Latin. Thomas Jefferson put it together in 1820, and after a painstaking restoration, it is back in the museum. On the Pacific coast, they are watching the whales, or is it the other way around? That story is next. There hasn't been a year like this along the Pacific coast in a long time. The waters are filled with humpback whales, drawing huge crowds of tourists. But what happens when two very different species of mammals come face to face? We asked John Blackstone to show us.
Watching whales off the California coast usually means heading a few miles out to sea.
There she goes.
But not this year, says Santa Cruz whale watching captain Ken Stagnaro.
They're usually here, but they're usually not quite so close to shore. I mean, you could literally see them from the beach a lot of times.
The humpback whales off Santa Cruz have been so close to shore recently, surfers and kayakers have had some dangerously close encounters. At 40 feet long and more than 30 tons, the whales present a clear risk as they feed on anchovies. But so far, says Stagnaro, the whales seem to be watching out for the people.
Maneuvering through all that boating traffic and chasing their food at the same time and being very conscious of the people around them was amazing.
Somehow they know that we couldn't take a flip of that tail.
They really are gentle giants.
How beautiful, how about that?
For the safety of both whales and humans, the Marine Mammal Act makes it a crime to get within 100 yards of a whale. But there's no law against whales coming close to people, says naturalist Maureen Gilbert.
Sometimes it seems like they are as intrigued with us as we are with them.
That's certainly how it seemed to those on an Oceanic Society whale-watching trip off San Francisco. 4 humpback whales just kept circling the boat, lifting their fins so close they could be touched. We don't know, of course, what effect these close encounters have on the whales, but Maureen Gilbert knows for sure what they do to humans.
It's just magical, giving people a life-changing experience because you are never the same after you see a whale in the wild.
Especially if you see one this close. John Blackstone, CBS News, Santa Cruz, California.
And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, good night.